Dear learners, welcome to live teleconferencing session. In this session, we will discuss about disaster risk analysis technique. Mostly in this session, focus upon that disaster risk analysis technique. It is an essential aspect of disaster management, which help us that it will help that understand, measure and reduce the impact of disaster on people, property and the environment. And if you think that disaster risk analysis technique is post disaster or responding after a disaster, not this one. It is it is not about after a crisis, it's about responding after a crisis. Okay, it's about how anticipating vulnerabilities, assessing potential hazards and planning proactively. It that these techniques is combined with the scientific data and community participation, ensuring that recovery and preparedness efforts are grounded mostly. Okay, mostly in the session we'll discuss about the how the informed decision making and the resilient construction. So informed decision making in the sense how to be in the data and all. So before going into that, that after every disaster there used to be a lot of questions used to be arise for those involved in response and recovery. Okay, questions like that what is the extent of devastation in terms of life and property. You can say that degree of devastation to life, property and infrastructure, and what are the social and economic impacts. And especially that if you look into that housing, infrastructure and finances, and what are the priority areas where we have to concentrate, whether we have to concentrate on relief, whether we have to concentrate on rehabilitation, whether we have to concentrate on reconstruction. So all the three dimensions are more important, that is relief, rehabilitation and reconstruction. So these are not simple questions, they require a systematic assessment. Okay, these three questions we have to be answer based upon the systematic assessment. Why we need a systematic assessment? Because we have to support the decision makers to developing a proper response strategies. That several disaster risk management methods and techniques have been designed over the analysis. That it's by nature in disaster risk analysis, by its nature, it is include the multiple disciplines like, for example, geography, sociology, economics and psychology, management science and environmental science. So it is a kind of to bring together. You have to bring together all the discipline to in a comprehensive picture of where and how the intervention is needed. That without knowing that where and that how the intervention is, that we can't do the proper that disaster risk reduction. In that way, that it is more important. In the in the earlier time, if you look into that before 15 years or 20 years, there was a carrying these kind of analysis is a kind of it is a long and tedious process. It could take several months that just to calculate the direct physical causes. But today that is entirely different. With the help of the modern tools, with the help of the more data system and the analytic frameworks, the same process can be completed within 2 to 3 years. So the shift that reflect progress in disaster risk management and also. So in that way, that risk analysis plays a major role. So there is one definition is there, risk analysis. So what do you mean by risk analysis? I quote the Kogler definitions. Risk analysis is a basic instrument of disaster risk management and used to study factors and plan measures for reducing risk and impact. Okay, so what he was saying that as per Kogler, risk analysis is an essential part of that essential part of disaster management. It helps us understand both kind of what are the kind of a risk has been exist, or you can say what are the danger has been there and why they occur. That is also more important, and how serious their effects efforts could be. So in other words, we can say that risk analysis is it's a kind of a systematic study of all the factors that lead to a disaster. So that that we can, once you understand that what are the factors lead to a disaster, we can plan and prevent disaster action to reduce the impact on people, property, and the environment. That in disaster management there is one common saying is that we can't avoid the disaster, but we can reduce the impact of the disaster. So for that we should understand what are the factors lead to a disaster. So that we can plan and preventive, and also in that if you take into the Kohler definition, so there is two kinds of factors are there. One is the hazard analysis, another one is the vulnerability analysis. In the hazard analysis, that this in the hazard analysis, this part mostly focus upon the nature of the disaster itself. Okay, it will mostly focus upon the nature of the disaster. In the hazard analysis, it used to focus upon the what type of the disaster may occur. Like for example, flood, cyclone, or earthquake. For example, you can take it that the coastal area. What are the disaster you may expect in the coastal area? Mostly it used to be cyclone, flood during rainy season, tsunami. These are the things also there. And when it comes to hilly areas, you can expect earthquake, landslide, that deforestation. And so these are the things also there. So in the hazard analysis, mostly focus upon the what type of disaster may occur and how intense, whether it's severe or whether it is intense or whether it's a severe or how it is. So that is more important. Like for example, take into the earthquake. When it comes to earthquake, it will lead to a large kind of, it will damage the property and it will lead to loss of lives also. But when it comes to, if you take into the floods, that in the floods, mostly it used to be the loss of livelihoods, loss of, infrastructure, and also it won't impact much on that, loss of lives and all. So for that, we need to know how the disaster, how the hazard, whether it is intense or whether it is a severe, it could be. And another thing is that how kind of a widespread damage it could be. Okay, how it can that make the damage and how frequently these things are occurs. So this is the mostly it focused upon the hazard analysis. So if you know about the hazard analysis, that the decision maker can easily plan where and when a disaster is not likely to be strike. For example, if you take into the monsoon season, the flood may be the urban floods used to be there, fast flood. So many things are there. If you know about the details about the hazards, you can plan. The decision maker can plan what and when the disaster is most likely used to be. And another thing is that vulnerability analysis. So mostly vulnerability analysis is like that it is a studies how the fragile people are, how the fragile the community are, how the fragile the systems are to the hazards, because it looks at who is the most most risk and why, like for example, people staying in poor housing, weak infrastructure and lack of preparedness, these people used to affect more and more. So for that we should know about the vulnerability analysis. So based on the definitions, that risk analysis is the that you have to integrate. It has to integrate, and scientifically we have to measure and understand before the disaster comes, so that the community and the government can plan, prepare, measure to prevent or minimize the efforts. For example, if you look into that, we have mentioned it, the disaster risk reduction technique. It means minimize the impact of the disaster. It's not like that we are managing the disaster. It's like a minimize the impact of the disaster. For when we have that proper hazard analysis and vulnerability analysis, we can easily measure the risk analysis part also. So here next, so we have seen about the that brief about the need of the disaster risk analysis. Now we have to see about the need for data. So when we are without data, it's very difficult to understand. We can't measure anything. So when we talk about the disaster risk analysis, one of the first thing to remember is that data is the backbone of every effective disaster management system. Okay, without reliable data, it's impossible to understand the risk of the true scale of risk, or that we can't design the appropriate system. For that we need a data. That's why that each and every throughout the India we have a national level national disaster management plan, state disaster management plan, district disaster management plan, block level disaster management plan, and the village level disaster management plan. In the plan they used to make it based upon the collection of the data. Once you have the data, it is one kind of a backbone of every effective disaster management system. So in this aspect, that the Sendai framework plays a major role. The Sendai framework target is that to reduce the disaster risk reduction in 2015 to 2030. This framework emphasizes that that it emphasizes the idea very strongly about the data. What happened is that this framework brought all the nations together to the world, and they have brought a shared commitment toward improving the disaster related knowledge and information. Today, if you take into that, that 93% of the member states of the United Nations, they used to conduct the national reviews regularly and they used to report their progress in the disaster risk reduction. In that Sendai framework, they have given the 4 priority, and then the priority number 1 is that the framework clearly mentioned that disaster policies and practices should be evidence based. That meaning that decisions mostly based upon the solid data about people's vulnerability and their coping capacity and the exposure to the hazards. So what do you mean by evidence based? When you are talking about the evidence, we have to provide the appropriate data and all. So when you have a proper data, you can easily we can assess the people's vulnerability also, and we can analyze their capacity and how their exposure to hazard and also. Look into that all the Sendai hazards, reducing mortality, reducing the number of people affected, cutting down economic analysis, and protecting infrastructure. That it mostly how all countries that used to collect the data and use the data. Without information, even the best policies risk and that being mostly it used to be reactive only. So that in the essence, what you say that is the data transform the disaster management from the reactive to proactive approach. So here reactive in the sense, reactive is the most relief oriented approach. When it comes to proactive approaches, that it focused upon the preparedness, it focused upon the people capacity, it focused upon the reconstruction, it focused upon the resilience of the community and all. It mostly it used to help where are the risks are highest, who is more vulnerable, and who need a immediate immediate attention. So they normally, and other thing also, the data used to give a measurable progress and help us to understand whether action we are taking actually making people safer and also. And when it comes to data, the need, why we need is that we have to understand how the data is supporting the decision making. When we collect information about hazards and when we are collecting information about the hazards and impact across both time and space. So we have to begin see the pattern. So the pattern, let's say that why certain communities are more affected than others and how risks are evolving. For example, if you take into that, monsoon season in the southern India and, during cyclone in the coastal region and during rainy season in the hill areas. So you can see this some kind of a pattern, that where is the flood, where is the, that flood used to come regularly, how the people are, affecting who are them are affecting regularly. So you can find the, that in kind of a repetitive pattern. So these pattern will help the decision maker to understand and they can make plan easily. When it comes to risk analysis, again that is that the role of disaster data is that this data allows government and the institution to prioritize their investment and deciding where to strengthen infrastructure and where to allocate emergency funds and where to focus upon the early warning system. So equally important in the availability of disaggregated data, meaning like that data has been broken into local and community level. So this kind of a data that reveal how disaster affect people differently based on the geography, income, gender and occupation. Okay, because that impact of earthquake is entirely different, and if you compare to impact of flood is entirely different. It mostly focused upon the geography, time and spaces. So it is specially that's why we have to make policies context specific policy. That the disaster policies which we have make in Uttarakhand, it won't suitable for Karnataka or Tamil Nadu or Kerala. The same way the Uttarakhand geography and that that various things are entirely different. So that way we have to make a context specific policies, and we can say that in Indian example we can say that state specific or region specific, or that sometimes you have to go with the district or village specific policy and all. So however, that these kind of things are used to, that there are various challenges are there. Like for example, calculating accurate and disaggregate data for medium and large scale disaster is not easy, because the large scale has the more that more complex, and the data collection that it's very difficult. Here we have to understand one thing: what we can't measured cannot be managed. Okay, what cannot be measured means cannot be managed. If you can't measure the impact, then you can't manage and also. So for effective disaster management, we must that we must need a strong, reliable and interoperable data system that provide timely information to the planners and responders community. Only then we can take a risk reduction effect, truly translate into the that conflict into the resilience in the community level and all. So here that that there is a one simple sentence we can say that what cannot be measured cannot be managed. Now we are moving into that problem solving techniques. So problem solving techniques, in the sense we have two levels of there. One is the problem solving techniques at the community level, and the problem solving technique at the institutional level. When it comes to that problem solving technique, one thing is that first thing is that brainstorming. So what do you mean by brainstorming? Brainstorming is one of the most important disaster risk analysis. What it used to do is that it brings together the different stakeholders, government officials, non-governmental organization, community members, even that affected population, to collectively generate and the solution. Okay, the main idea is that to encourage creativity without judgment. Like for example, brainstorming. Like for example, if you take any coastal village, take an example of any coastal village. People living in the Delhi can't make that make a policy in that without knowing the that geographic location of that village. So that way we have to sit with the government, NGO and various level people. We have to discuss what are the vulnerable area, why this region, this area is continuously affected by the floods, why the infrastructure is so poor. Are they are they using the government schemes for constructing houses and all? So many things used to happen. So it is a kind of a thing is that it used to be collectively sitting together without judgment. Here participants are also asked to share as many ideas possible. So how that how whether it is unusual may sound, but this idea is to be create an open sounds, that open space where people can freely think differently and they can explore the possibilities and all. And there are that many things also there. First that quantity matters more than the quantity matters more than the quality in the beginning. and you can say that there is no criticism during the idea that generation phase. Otherwise what used to do is that people used to keep silent, and participants are that they have to build refine others idea also. And finally the most of the discussion used to focused upon the relevance and the practical solution. So this is the most important technique, that is called the brainstorming. When you took brainstorming, where can we apply these techniques? That you can use this technique before and after a disaster. For example, that some disaster we can predict easily. So that in that case we can use it before. For example, if your cyclones always that, as I mentioned, that cyclones always affect the local livelihoods, so we can brainstorm that possible alternative income activities until the resilience of the community. Similarly, before communities that can use brainstorming to prepare a pool of economically viable ideas, they can make it. The success of the technique is that mostly how the community is actively participated, or how the members is actively participate, and they have a trainers also there, that they used to create a supportive and participatory methods. And also like another technique is that star busting. It's a kind of a interesting, and that way that it's a kind of a structured form of brainstorming, that focusing upon the how the new ideas, but mostly focusing upon the possibility of practically existing data. Like for example, it used to ask the questions, mostly it never generate answer and all. It used to mostly focus the questions, fundamental questions like that who, what, when, where, and why, and how. Mostly it used to focus upon these 6 questions only. These 6 questions, that it will help inquiry or help participants, that explore more and more also. It helps a team test. It used to test the strength of the team, and before coming into resume it also. For example, if a community has a brainstorm in idea to resolve livelihood after a cyclone, that star busting technique will help them to break and broad idea into actionable parts. That is more important. Idea used to be have everyone, but the plan who used to having, that is there. Like for example, I mentioned it the 6 question, that is who, what, when, where, why, and how. Here who will implement the plan, which stakeholders are responsible, what are the resources we have, what are the skills we have, what are the partners we needed, and where should be the intervention focused upon, why the idea is more important in the local context, how it can be executed effectively. So in that way, if you are answering these questions, participants, they used to move into the simple idea generation and to develop a structured plan during the disaster context. So here, and the role of the facilitator also, they have to frame the guiding questions for them, and that the facilitator critically examine the relevance and feasibility of ideas by the participants, and he has to promote the deeper thinking and the collective activity. And when it comes to, so far we have seen about how the community level, that this is a problem solving technique. When it comes to institutional level is the it's kind of a thing is there, like we have to organize a critical information during disaster, and it support fast and informed decision making. And also like institutional decision making, there is one thing is that called the template based method. The template based method is it is a organizational and institutional scale is there. There is normally we used to have a normal template or a standard operating procedure, we can say that. So they that decision makers and professional, they need to structure the tools, that they used to make quick and accurate information or judgment during emergency. And also like brainstorming, it used to focus upon the generating idea. And another thing is that what if technique. That what if technique is that it is a kind of a most practical, that most practical and analytical tool of disaster risk analysis. It used to be different from the brainstorming and star busting because it mostly focused upon the spontaneous community inputs. Instead, it brings that together experts from the different domains to systematically examine the potential risk of the disaster. And also, so mostly that the key features of what if technique is that what if suppose power fails during evaluation. What if medical, that supplies run short in 48 hours? What if communication lines are disrupted? So when you are working out a one plan, then if you ask the questions like what if is not happen, what if is not there, so that these kind of a techniques will help the decision maker to make ready recurrence of the work. And another thing is the damage assessment approach. In the mostly that damage assessment that approaches, it used to focus upon the extent and the impact of a disaster. It used to help the better recovery and reconstruction planning. That's why we have a post disaster needs assessment. There are various needs also there. Mostly these kind of assessment we need a time cost and we need a data accuracy also, and it will help the efficiency and the effectiveness. Like for example, mostly if you see any state are affected by the massive level disaster, mostly that central team goes and visited there, and the state teams also give the report based on the disaster. So it used to give the that accurate information about the situation, so that the decision maker can plan or they can distribute the that relief. And another important thing is that post disaster needs assessment. So mostly these kind of data is that it is a kind of a baseline data. It is to assess the damages and impacts also, and mostly it focused upon the socio-economic and cross cutting. So if you look into that disaster risk analysis, it's a kind of that it is a comprehensive process that bring together, it brings together of the data, community knowledge and the expert analysis also. So throughout the session we have seen about the various techniques at operate at the various level, at the community level, that brainstorming and the star busting, and the institutional level template based method and the what if method. When it comes to data, we have seen about the data based assessment and post disaster assessment also. So mostly these, as I already mentioned, that what we can't measure can't manage. So the data is more important for data risk analysis also, disaster risk reduction also. Thank you. Thanks a lot for listening.